Today I will tell you a story that will inspire you, move you, and remind you that strength has no gender and courage has no limits. This is the story of a woman who entered a world that doubted her, laughed at her, and underestimated her. But she walked out as a legend. The sun had barely risen over Fort Silver Ridge when the buses arrived. Dust swirled through the air as dozens of new recruits stepped out, dragging their heavy duffel bags, hearts pounding in their chests. Some tried to act confident, others hid their fear behind nervous laughter. Among them was Riley Carter. She was small, quiet, and carried herself with a calm that made her stand out. Her gray eyes scanned everything around her. The shouting officers, the long barracks, the other recruits sizing each other up. She adjusted her uniform, kept her chin up, and stayed silent. One recruit, a tall man named Miller, looked at her and smirked. "You sure you're in the right place, sweetheart?" he said under his breath. "You'll be gone by Friday." Riley didn't even look at him. She just said, "We'll see." The sound of boots hitting the ground made everyone turn. Sergeant Dalton stepped out of the office, tall, broad, and with a scare cutting down his jaw. His voice carried across the yard like thunder. "Welcome to Fort Silver Ridge. You are not soldiers yet. You're clay, and I am going to break you down until there's nothing left but discipline, pain, and purpose." Every recruit stiffened. Dalton's eyes swept across the group, stopping when he saw Riley. He tilted his head. "You lost, little girl." "No, sir," she answered. Dalton grinned. "We'll see how long that lasts." The first week was chaos. Endless push-ups, sprints through mud carrying logs until their arms shook. Some cried, some quit. Riley didn't speak, didn't complain. She just did every task with quiet focus. Even when Dalton screamed inches from her face, her answer was always calm. "Yes, sir." The others began to notice. She didn't eat much, didn't talk much, but she never fell behind. She moved with precision, her eyes always forward. When others stumbled, she helped them up. When the night came and everyone collapsed in exhaustion, she stayed toe-clean her rifle. One night, Miller, the same recruit who mocked her, whispered to his bunkmate, "She's trying too hard, she'll burn out," but she didn't. The fifth morning brought the endurance run, miles of rocky terrain with full gear and rifle. Dalton stood in front of their recruits. "This run separates the talkers from the doers," he barked. "Some of you won't finish. Some of you will wish you hadn't started." When the whistle blew, they took off. The air filled with the sound of heavy breathing and boots pounding dirt. The sun was merciless. By the second mile, recruits started slowing down. By the third, some dropped out, but Riley didn't stop. Her steps were even, her breathing steady. By mile 5, she was at the front. Dalton watched in disbelief as she crossed the finish line first, not just ahead of the women, but ahead of every single recruit. She stopped, caught her breath, and looked back at the others still running. Dalton walked up to her. "You think this makes you special, Carter?" "No, sir," she said softly. "It means I can still do better." For a second, something flickered in his eyes, cried. "Maybe." Booty quickly hit it. "Back in line," he growled. That night in the barracks, no one laughed at her anymore. Even Miller stayed quiet. As the weeks passed, Riley only got stronger. During obstacle courses, she moved with speed and precision. In combat drills, she fought with fierce control. Her aim in shooting practice was perfect. Bullseye after bullseye. She was no longer the quiet recruit. She was the standard everyone tried to reach. But Dalton wasn't done testing her. One afternoon, he called her out in front of the group. "Carter," she ran forward. "Yes, sir." He threw a heavy sandbag at her feet. 50 lay-by, or you'll carry this through the entire course." Alone, the recruits looked at her in disbelief. The course was brutal. Walls, ropes, tunnels, barbed wire. Even without the sandbag, it broke most recruits. "Yes, sir," Riley said simply. Dalton's eyes narrowed. "Go." She lifted the bag, threw it over her shoulders, and ran. The first wall tore at her hands. The barbed wire scraped her arms, and the mud sucked at her boots. The bag felt like fire burning into her back. But she didn't stop. She climbed, crawled, and pushed until she finished the course. When she reached the end, her uniform was covered in mud, her face streaked with sweat and dirt. Dalton looked at her silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Not bad, Carter. Not bad at all." The recruits behind her clapped. For the first time, a small smile appeared on her face. Days turned into weeks. The final test approached, the survival drill. 3 days in the wilderness with minimal food, no tents, and a mission to complete. Teams had to work together to navigate through rough terrain and reach an extraction point. Dalton divided them into groups. Riley was placed with Miller and 3 others. When they started, Tension was high. Miller didn't like taking orders from her, but she didn't let that stop her. They moved through swamps, thick forests, and freezing rivers. When the group grew tired, Riley carried the heavier gear. When one of them slipped down a hill, she went back and pulled him up. On the second night, a storm hit. Their fire died and their map got soaked. Miller threw his hands up. "We're lost." Riley took the wet map, studied it under the dim flashlight, and pointed toward the mountains. "If we follow this ridge, we'll reach the extraction point by sunrise." Miller frowned. "You don't even know if that's right." "Then trust me," she said. They followed her, climbing through the rain and wind, shelled every step, even as her body trembled with exhaustion. When they reached the clearing at dawn, the helicopter was waiting. They had made it. Dalton stood by the landing zone, watching them approach. "Who led the team?" he asked. The others pointed at Riley. Dalton looked at her, then nodded slowly. "You did good, Carter." "Thank you, sir," she said. He hesitated before adding, "You remind me of someone I used to serve with." He never gave up either. Riley's eyes softened. "My father used to say the sir." Dalton looked at her. "Your father was a soldier." "Yes, sir, he never came home." The sergeant's expression changed, respect replacing every trace of doubt. "Then he'd be proud of what you've done here." The final day came, graduation. The recruits stood in perfect formation, their uniforms spotless, their hearts full. Families filled the stands, cheering as names were called one by one. When Dalton called Riley Carter, a wave of applause broke out. He pinned the badge on her chest himself. "You came here with nothing but determination," he said quietly, "and you turned it into strength. You didn't just survive this. You changed what it means to be a soldier." Riley saluted. "Thank you, sir." Dalton stepped back, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "You're dismissed, Sergeant Carter." When the ceremony ended, she walked across the field one last time. The same ground that once saw her mocked and underestimated now echoed with the sound of her victory. Miller approached her, his tone humble. "I was wrong about you," he said. "You earned my respect." Riley smiled faintly. "You earned mine, too." As she reached the gate, the wind lifted her hair, and she looked back at the barracks, the mud, the drills, the endless shouts. Every bruise, every scar, every sleepless night had led her here. She had come as a recruit everyone thought was too small, too weak, too quiet. She was leaving as a leader, a symbol, and a reminder that strength isn't measured by size or words. It's measured by will. And as the flag waved high over Fort Silver Ridge, their recruits who once doubted her now whispered her name with respect. Because legends aren't born in comfort, they're forged in struggle. Riley Carter had become that legend. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories of courage, resilience, and history that moves the soul.